the privilege that we have maintained for 50 years of being the world's reserve currency, call it the petrodollar, that is beginning to fray. And when you realize that we are a country, when we talk about decay, that is creating $100,000 of debt per second, one, two, three, and keep on going till your fingers fall off 24/7, $1 trillion of debt every 90 days. It took 200 years to do that.
Hello, I'm Zahra Sethna, and I'm happy to welcome you to Collapse Life, the thinking person's guide to civilization and demise. For the past year, this podcast has been exploring the many ways in which the world is changing around us and what those changes mean for our daily lives. Several past guests have predicted we might be seeing big changes, black swan type events, in the final quarter of 2024. And here we are in the beginning of October, and the mix of complex events seems to be compounding globally and domestically. It seems like the black swan may very well rear its ugly head. As I've always been clear, Collapse Life is not a financial channel, but the escalating conflict between Iran and Israel and the devastation of Hurricane Helene here at home all impact your finances and mine too. And we need to prepare because what's coming has the potential to unlock misery, anger, resentment, destruction. That's why I've invited Andy Schectman, president and founder of Miles Franklin Precious Metals, to help us put some perspective around what's happening, whether we're watching the death of the US dollar, how the BRICS alliance is growing, what that means, a broad macro view of how this complexity might unleash major changes for the US and for you, our viewers. Andy, warm welcome to Collapse Life. Thank you so much for being
Wow.
here.
Thank you for being here. I couldn't agree more with the way you summarized all of that because it's all related, all of it. It's all one big jigsaw puzzle, one without the other. It's an incomplete picture. So thanks for having me. I look forward to chatting with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like a doctor looking at one particular body part without taking into account the whole system. So yeah, you'll be our resident doctor today. You have deep expertise in wealth preservation and precious metals, and we are very looking forward to having your take on how the events that are happening right now are going to shape the economy and the practical steps that people can take to safeguard their financial future. Maybe just to start, if you don't mind, just give people a quick overview of your background, 35 years in the business. So just explain kind of why you're the right person to warn people that they shouldn't be sitting on the sidelines, but actively managing their future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And I'll also tell you, well, let me just kind of shape the narrative. As you mentioned, this will be our 35th year. Actually, February will represent 35 years in business. But my father and I, who started this companies, are the least likely cast of characters to have ever achieved what we did. We started on a wing and a prayer. I guess you could argue that if it's still alive, we are the embodiment of the American dream.
Mm.
I say that to you because my dad's middle name is Miles, and his best friend, who lent us in 1989 $60,000
Wow.
in order to start our company, along with my parents selling their life insurance policies. Um, his middle name was Franklin.
Mm.
And we started in a one room office the size of a closet. And somehow, by the grace of God, here we are 35 years later. But the foundation of the way that I look at precious metals is something I want to just quickly touch on because I think it's important as we go through and talk about it, as precious metals will come into this discussion,
Mm-hmm.
is that he said to me, look, my dad said, listen, I was 19 at the time, and I went to the University of Minnesota with the intentions of playing baseball and hurt myself. And okay, Dad, I'll start this company with you a couple of years later. And he says, you're going to buy something every 2 weeks or I'm going to fire you. That's the only rule. Okay, Dad, I'll buy something. He's talking gold or silver. I said, oh, okay,
Okay.
I guess I can deal with that. He says, I won't let you make the same mistakes that I've made as a younger man, and you will do this. Now, looking back at it, I will tell you it's the best gift I've ever been given in my life. The gift of understanding the power of compounding. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
always have to be the compounding of interest, but the compounding of time. The to be regimented and methodical in paying yourself first, speaking to yourself down the road, a conversation with yourself when you're 19 with your 54-year-old self saying, hey, man, you need to put some money away. You need to save. You
Hmm.
need to take care of remembering that we have things to do when you're 54. And the point I'm getting at is that when I talk about precious metals, to me, it is not an investment. It is the foundation of my wealth. It's money that all along I never sold gold to protect from the sky falling. I'm not Chicken Little. It's more along the more along the lines of it's wealth. It's wealth that has outlived two world wars, German hyperinflation, the Great
Hmm.
Depression, pandemic. It's wealth that if I know I need, maybe for an opportunity, not just for an emergency, the way most people pigeonhole their view of gold, but maybe there's a heck of an opportunity when the dust settles. If not, I know that it's immutable wealth that I can leave to my kids or
Hmm.
to their kids or to their kids, that in the year 3000, long after the money in our wallets that we call money, it's actually currency, is hanging from a frame in the Smithsonian as an example of what used to be. To me, gold and silver will always be wealth, immutable wealth, as it has been since biblical times for over
Exactly.
5,000 years. So, as we go through this discussion, understand yes, I've been doing this for 35 years. Yes, I've seen an awful lot. But what shaped my view on precious metals as it relates to everything else we talk about is that it is wealth, period. It is
Hmm.
wealth that universally is accepted, has been, is, and will be in the future. So, as we move on and talk about this, please keep that in mind. But I'm very much looking forward to this conversation because, as I mentioned to you before we started, yeah, economics and precious metals and geopolitical, that's important. But as I've been doing this podcast circuit, I guess you could say, for the last 3 or 4 years, which has certainly changed my life more than anything I've ever done, I've realized that that's incomplete without looking at the other side, the social, the moral, um, the spiritual, if you will. All of these things together make a complete picture, and one without the other is incomplete. So yeah, that's pretty much who I am. And in 35 years and 10 billion in sales, we've never had a customer complaint. Something we're very proud of, and I would like to think we have the best reputation in the industry, but we're one that focuses on education, and that's who we are.
That's fantastic. Well, your idea that this is sort of a holistic picture, and we have to talk about all the different threads, is exactly in line with what we think here at Collapse Life as well. Um, and so you're the perfect fit for a conversation, particularly this week when everything seems to be blowing up, and we kind of all felt like this was going to happen around this period of time.
Right,
We didn't know what was going to happen.
right.
Um, and I think still some people are trying to put these pieces together and understand how they all kind of knock onto each other. So we have a growing, escalating conflict, which is very frightening, but it's far off for a lot of people. It's happening over there in a region of the world where they always have conflict. So, okay. And then we have a hurricane that has devastated a huge swath of the United States. And there's all sorts of stories swirling about what is actually happening there and that we're not really hearing the full details. We have supply chain disruptions. Then there's just the overall picture of inflation and market volatility and everything. So let's take a deep breath and kind of just paint a big picture from your view, because you are following all these things.
Yeah, well, I mean, life is like a roll of toilet paper, as some people say, and for most of our lives, that roll spun very slowly. We didn't notice it starting to spin faster and faster and getting closer to the cardboard. What is the cardboard? What does that represent? You can use that as a metaphor for growing older, or you can use that as a metaphor for where we are right now. Maybe the most important election of our lifetimes coming up in 40 days. Who knows? But what I would say is, yes, things seem to be spinning faster and faster and faster and faster, whether you're talking around the globe, in the Ukraine, in the Middle East, whether you're talking here at home with the disruption on the ports, with the disruption, of course, in such a horrible hurricane that's lacking media attention, that's lacking government attention, people missing, of course, and suffering. 3 million Americans in need of lots of help. Whether you're talking about the moral decay of the cities, the lawlessness in the inner cities, the questioning of the electoral process, whether any of us watching this believe that the elections were rigged, much of the world does. Whether much of us or many of us watching this believe that there's a two-tiered judicial system, many of the world do. Much of the world is looking at this country, which always looked to this country as the beacon of freedom and liberty. Kids growing up wanting to wear Levi's jeans, come to this country, listen to rock and roll, experience what this country had to offer, the best of what it had to offer. These things are being questioned around the globe, where we are valued by our lifestyle rather than by our merit, what we have accomplished. These are the things, to me, all of them put together, that are beginning to fray, if you will, the fabric of this country. And these are very important things and should not be overlooked whatsoever, because the privilege that we have maintained for 50 years of being the world's reserve currency, call it the petrodollar, that is beginning to fray. And when you realize that we are a country, when we talk about decay, that is creating $100,000 of debt per second. One, two, three, and keep on going till your fingers fall off, 24/7, $1 trillion of debt every 90 days. It took 200 years to do that. And Zahra, a trillion seconds ago, I often ask people that because I think it helps people get into the proper frame of mind. If we work long enough and hard enough, we'll make $1 million in our career. May not save it, you'll make it. Starting at bagging groceries when you're 15 until the time you retire, you're going to make $1 million. Did you save it? Maybe, maybe not. The point of it is that million sounds an awful lot like trillion. It can't be that long, right? Well, a trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago.
Wow.
And we are a country that is accumulating debt at such a massive, irresponsible pace, while at the same time, the fundamentals, the culture, the whitewashing of our culture, of our heritage in many respects, is beginning to, I think, affect not only this country, but the way that we are looked at around the globe. And these have far-reaching implications, which we will talk about. And so, yeah, I think it is all tied together. And the acceleration leading up to a massive election where, sadly, no matter what the outcome is, half of the country is going to be pissed off.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? Half of the country will be upset with the outcome and the lack of unity.
Yeah.
These are all very important things. America arguably does its best, has done its best with its back against the wall. And I would agree with that. The problem is this country has always been unified. And now we enter a period of time where you're defined by who you voted for in the election.
Yeah.
And it's red or blue, it's black or white, it's rich or poor, it's vaccine, no vaccine. You look at all of these things that have happened over the last several years, and you wonder what the hell's happening to this country.
Yeah.
And the most basic fundamentals of what this country is, even the nuclear family, is being ripped apart. Now, I want people to understand something. My parents were hippies, right? I was a jock who played baseball, went to college to play baseball, but at my heart, growing up in the 1970s, my parents were hippies. Lifestyle is something I embrace, right? I would go to play baseball, and I'd come home, and the stuff I saw growing up as a kid with my older sister and my parents, I get it. I all walks of life doesn't bother me, and I'm a patriot, right? And I love what this country has afforded me. But there are certain things in terms of how far we've shifted away from the fundamentals of this country, that I think are very disturbing, and I think is not lost on the rest of the world. But I want people to understand that I am very accepting of all walks of life and of all choices and lifestyles. It's the fact that this is all being thrown at us. It's being thrown in our face, and we must acknowledge instead of just respecting. And these are things that I think are breaking apart this country at the
Mhm.
seams and creating the divisiveness, the lack of unity. And I think they're all tied together. And as we tie it into the monetary side of things, people around the world are looking, well, geez, is this a country where are their elections fair? Is their judicial system fair? What's with the wokeness? What's with the lawlessness in the inner cities? What's with the massive accumulation of debt? All of these things are tied together. And I think people need to understand that times are changing because the exorbitant privilege that we have had as being the world's reserve currency for a very long time is beginning to disappear.
Yeah.
And I think these are the things as we move on through our conversation that we'll focus on and try and tie them all together, put all these crumbs together and fashion them into a cookie and see what we see.
Yeah. The divisiveness is something that we talk about very often with Collapse Life, and the fact that even a pandemic, which affected us all and seemingly in the same way, wasn't enough for us to kind of unite against a common enemy. We did so more anyway at 9/11 than we did when we were faced with a nameless, faceless so-called virus. So things have changed a lot since that period in 2001. Is there any hope that we can mend our fences and come together as a nation, or are we just going to have to figure out how we live together but without any kind of unity? What do you
Well,
think?
that's a tough question. I mean, that truly is a tough question. I hope so. Sometimes I begin to wonder if that is the case or not,
Yeah.
because the ideals that this country was founded upon are disappearing. I gave a presentation in Vancouver a year ago, and or in January of this year, almost a year ago. And when I got off the stage, I walked out and I was followed by a crowd of people who were asking me questions. I had to get off the stage so someone else could get up and talk. And I'm talking to all these people, and one of the things we're talking about is even something as mundane as the Pledge of Allegiance. And there's
Right.
a young man sitting next to me, maybe in his mid 30s, said, yeah, I was the last class in my elementary school that even said the Pledge of Allegiance. The things that the foundation of this country, the ideals of this country are so far removed from what they once were and being replaced by a different set of criteria, a different ideology, one that is not what this country used to be.
Mhm.
Something as important as the nuclear family. That's being ripped apart at the
Yeah.
seams. Now, please don't take this the wrong way. That's why I said my parents were hippies, because I've seen it all, but I always knew who a girl was and I always knew who a boy was. And all of these things that are happening, um, it's ripping apart,
Yeah.
I think, what made this country very special. But you I think you have to take a step back, and you have to take a step back and look at this. But you even made a comment about 9/11, um, the way the world looks at us, right? So 9/11, we invaded Iraq looking for weapons of mass destruction. They did this to us, the rallying cry, let's get them, let's get them. We go there under false pretenses. We invaded their country 20 years ago, looking for weapons of mass destruction. We're sorry we destroyed your country and toppled your regime. We didn't find any. Our
Right.
bad. But guess what? We're still here 20 years later. 20 years later, we're still occupying your country. We're sanctioning 14 of your banks because you have the audacity to try and buy liquid natural gas that is routed through Iranian banks. Those banks are sanctioned, 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 sanctioned.
Yeah.
So you're sanctioned. So what did the Iraqis do? Well, they have made trading in dollars illegal. If you trade in dollars and own a business, you will be thrown in jail and your business will be confiscated. As of January of this year, all green bills have been removed out of the banks in Iraq. They have officially applied to BRICS, and they are kicking Western coalition forces out of the country. They look at us as being massively hypocritical.
Mhm.
So when we talk about the way the world looks at us, not only have we done that to Iraq, Janet Yellen can say to CNN not too long ago, you know, Xi Jinping and Putin, well, they can be buddies in BRICS. Well, thank you very much, Madam Secretary. That's rather benevolent of you. But if Xi gives one penny to the Putin war machine, we will sanction their banks, their companies, and Beijing itself.
Mhm.
Never mind the fact that we've given 200 billion to the Ukraine with no congressional oversight, Stinger missiles and F-16s, and training their pilots in the Arizona desert. None of that matters because we're the world reserve currency. Don't
Right.
forget it. And so this ripping apart of our honor and our prestige globally, well, if things were just normal back at home, oh, let's see, open borders, lawlessness, election interference, judicial system questioning, all of these things, it's a pie that comes together, one
Yeah.
without the other. If this country was what it once was, I think the mismanagement of the world reserve currency, even our transgressions across the globe, could be overlooked. And that's kind of why I think it's so important to have this discussion with what you talk about, melded with what I talk about, because together it's a holistic picture, one that is making much more sense because the confidence, you see, that confidence is fraying. 50 years ago, August, Henry Kissinger was dispatched to Saudi Arabia 3 years after President Nixon closed the gold window. Well, let me back up a moment. I know you didn't ask me this, but just to give a bigger picture. At the end of World War II, we were the world reserve currency. We took over for the pound sterling, and our currency was as good as gold. Other countries could take their dollars that they held and always exchange it back to the United States for gold at a fixed rate of $35 an ounce. And that's why we were the world reserve currency. And that lasted all the way till 1971 when President de Gaulle said, you know, you guys are printing more dollars to fund the Vietnam War than you have in gold. So he sent warships to New York Harbor filled with dollars and said, can we please have our gold?
Yeah.
Sure, we gave it to him. And so much so that Nixon closed the gold window, fearing that they would take all of the gold, rest of the world would. Went back on our promise to the world, no longer redeemable. So now our currency is fiat. 3 years later, Kissinger went to Saudi Arabia and struck the deal with the Saudis. We'll protect you. We'll provide you military support. No one's ever going to mess with you. But for that privilege, you will denominate oil exclusively, you and OPEC, in dollars globally and take any excess reserves and put them into US treasuries.
Mhm.
Okay, good deal. So that was the case for 50 years. But August of this year, just a couple months ago, the Saudis said, well, you know, we're not going to re up the exclusivity deal. We will still take dollars for oil, but we're not going to do it only with
Right.
dollars. That ended the hegemony of this country. And now things are going to start to spin faster. And when you put that into context with losing the culture and the ideals and the prestige of
Mhm.
this country in many respects through debt, through all of the things that we just spoke about, I think it becomes a far more concerning picture,
Yeah.
one that must be thought about more holistically rather than just looking at one single piece at a time.
No, absolutely. Um, Two things come to mind I want to ask you. First, you had we've seen you tell a story to Robert Kiyosaki in another podcast about other countries coming to repatriate their gold from the United States and the United Kingdom, and just in more recent years than the story that you just told about the 1970s. Can you just recap that for us? And what do you think that was an indicator of? And why didn't we respond? Or is there anything that we could have done?
Well, this is
Um,
a huge deal. Huge, 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 huge. But let's first say why gold is held in the UK and in the United States.
mhm,
The London Bullion Metals Association is a 140-year-old exchange. It's the oldest in the world. And the COMEX, or the COMEX in New York is since 1974. They're the two, have been for a very long time, the two epicenters of commodity trading. So banks would typically, central banks would leave their gold safely held in Western jurisdiction, in Western rule of law, LOL, these days. um, inside of the Bank of England and the New York Federal Reserve, because Bank of England would give it safety and would give it access, direct access to the LBMA. The New York Federal Reserve would hold everyone's gold because it gave them direct access to the New York branch of the COMEX. And so everyone just left it here because, again, this country was a country that, and so was England, where this was held to a higher standard. But that is beginning to change. You see, after what I just told you about Iraq, and the way Janet Yellen talks about Beijing giving any money whatsoever to Russia, what did we do? We stole, let's call it what it is. It's not sanctioning, we stole $5 billion worth of Russian treasuries. And we used it, even worse yet, to mostly in the form of weapons to enrich our military industrial complex, gave to the Ukraine, a country they're in the midst of a war against. When you are the world reserve currency, you must remain neutral. It is not up to us, especially when half the world finds us to be incredibly hypocritical, to say you can use our dollars, but no, you guys, you're bad. In fact, we're going to take your treasuries. We're much better than you, and we're going to take your treasuries and we're going to give it to the country you're in the middle of a war against in the form of lethal weapons. Well, that ain't cool. That's not cool at all. And I think that's a line perhaps you never come back from. You lose that trust. This is a system that once Nixon closed the gold window, and especially since the Saudis said, we're not going to be exclusive with dollars anymore, where this is something you don't come back from, potentially. So what have we seen over the last few years? Put my glasses on to read this because this is just a simple Google search. Ready? Germany. These are the countries that have repatriated their gold from the Bank of England and the New York Fed. Germany, Austria, Slovakia, Argentina, the Netherlands, Saudi Arabia, Hungary, Belgium, Egypt, Senegal, Romania, Nigeria, Poland, Ghana, India, Turkey, France, Serbia, Venezuela, Algeria, Cameroon, South Africa, Czechoslovakia. I can keep on going.
Wow.
And now the conventional wisdom, Zahra, is that it was because of this lack of trust. But there's something deeper embedded in what I believe is the rationale behind this. And it's something called the unit settlement currency, which hopefully we'll have time to chat about, and has to do with the BRICS.
Yeah.
But needless to say, this is another example of how our trust has been squandered. And countries are saying, I don't want you holding my gold anymore. And Venezuela is a good example. Venezuela asked the Bank of England, can we please have our gold back? No. Now, granted, you have Maduro as president, which is being the whole election issue in Venezuela is a whole different argument. But the point of it is that these epicenters of both of England and the United States should be impartial.
Right.
It is not up for us, the West, who has, you could argue, been, by much of the world's opinion, for 5 centuries, been borderline tyrannical.
Right.
And so we should not be the ones that pass judgment if you want to be an epicenter of trade and or the world reserve currency. It should be one of impartiality.
Right.
And that is beginning to, I think, be questioned around the globe, the wisdom of trusting the West. And you can see that in something as important and as relevant as everyone saying, give us back our gold.
And now all of these countries have formed this BRICS alliance, which I think by now most people have heard of and understand in some way. Essentially, it's a group of countries that would have been unlikely partners up until recently. The one thing that they do share is, just as you say, this resentment of the imperialism of the West, the hegemony, the unfair tactics and practices. And they are now growing very strong and very separate from the United States and its allies. They're about to meet in the next couple of weeks. What are you expecting out of that annual meeting? What do you think we might see in terms of headlines?
Well, yeah, so the BRICS originally stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Last year at the meeting in Johannesburg, they added Iran. Egypt, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. And they also added Argentina, but when Milei took over, he said, I'm going to go a different way. A lot of people think the West got a hold of Milei. Okay, fine.
Hmm.
But they're not in it. And there was a meeting in Novograd, Russia, that coincided with the G7 meeting just recently in Italy. And the Royal Crown Prince was invited to this meeting. And he said, I'm a little bit busy. I can't make it. But he sent his delegates to the meeting in Russia, and which is an ominous sign. Turn down the West, go to the BRICS, where we saw some very important things come out of this meeting. The meeting that you're speaking about is in just a couple of weeks in Russia. We found out that 59 other countries have already formally thrown their hat in the ring to join the BRICS. But before we even go there, you need to understand, just as it is right now, the BRICS are something that is incredibly formidable. They
Hmm.
represent a larger portion of human population. They
Hmm.
represent a larger portion of global GDP. They represent a far more superior military might with three of the four largest nuclear arsenals on the planet. They represent the majority of all of the trade routes across the globe in sea and on land, including the Straits of Hormuz and the Red Sea. They produce the majority of all of the world's commodities. They produce 85% in the Eurasian continent, all of the rare earths that are needed for a green agenda. Haven't thought this one out very well because China, as a matter of fact, refined 100%, not just 90%, but 100% of all of the green rare earth minerals and metals last year. Haven't thought this out very well. So when you talk about how formidable these folks already are, it is growing. Now, the union that you are speaking about is growing more and more formidable. But people don't understand. I've been talking about this for 4 years. People thought I was crazy 4 years ago. In the 5,000 podcasts I've done, almost everyone talks about the BRICS.
Yeah.
And this is an 18-year endeavor. This is not something that just sprung out of nowhere a few years ago. It's been 18 years they've been putting this together, very methodical, very regimented,
Hmm.
um, dotting their I's and crossing their T's. But now we find that 59 more countries have said, I'd like to join. So when you talk about the US hegemony, it's dead. It's gone. It
Yeah.
was gone the day the Saudis said we're not going to re-up the petro deal, but the supremacy is still here. And that's fading. We were at 75% of global reserves were held in dollars. We're now down into the 50s. It's starting to accelerate. But
Yeah.
there were a few very important things that came out of this meeting, things that I don't know how they'll play out when we talk about what's going to happen at this meeting. But some of the things that I expect to be talked about. First of all, people need to understand, and if they're watching this and haven't heard about the BRICS, there are a few other things that they should try and Google and maybe start to understand a little better.
Hmm.
And these would be some of the most important developments of my career. I'm going to answer this question, but I want to make sure that it's fully understood. Let's go back for a moment to 2019. The Bank of International Settlements reclassified gold as the world's only other tier one reserve asset. Now, going back to the end of World War II at Bretton Woods, when the dollar became the world reserve currency, replacing the pound sterling, uh, the dollar and the U.S. Treasury were the only tier one assets. And it was that
Hmm.
way for 75 years or so, when in 2019, the most powerful bank in the world, the BIS, Bank of International Settlements, said, by the way, gold is now the only other tier one asset alongside dollars and treasuries. Keep that in mind. That means a riskless asset.
Hmm.
So we move forward and we see some things coming out of this meeting. But you need to keep that in mind when we talk about uh, all these countries repatriating their gold.
Yeah.
But if we look since 2019, the central banks have been buying gold at a level the world has never seen. And mostly these countries, like hand over fist, India is a good example. They bought 1.5 times the amount of gold they bought all of last year, which is a record year, in the first 4 months of this year, and
Wow.
brought it all home, along with 100 metric tons held at the Bank of England since 1991. Brought it all home. Major original founding member of the BRICS. All right, so they in the BRICS meeting. Well, one other thing, I do believe that the Belt Road Initiative. A couple of things people need to understand: Tier One revision of gold, the Belt Road Initiative, and I'm going to answer your question, but I just want to backfill it. The Belt Road Initiative, it's the largest infrastructure project in human history.
Yeah.
People need to understand this is all connected. This is China's way of connecting Asia, Africa, and parts of Europe. It represents 75% of human population, 50% of global GDP as it is, along with two other groups, the Eurasian Economic Union. These are all the former Russian countries that end in, or countries from the USSR that end in stan, like Kazakhstan, and then the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, who, by the way, Iran and Saudi Arabia have joined. It is the largest regional financial and military organization on the planet. Now, a friend of mine, James Rickards, said last year he thought these two countries would join, or these two organizations. Forget about the Belt Road. They're all going to be part of this union. They all will be. But the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Union, he thought that they would be melded into the BRICS. I've been saying that for 4 years. He said it publicly, and he has 1 million followers. So a lot of people thought they would have been melded in last year in the meeting in Johannesburg, and were disappointed when that didn't happen, nor did the common currency come out. But I'm not. I think it will happen. The president of Belarus has called for a summit to bring these two groups into the fold.
Okay.
So some of the things that we could see happen. We could see the Eurasian Economic Union and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the countries that are in these two groups join into the BRICS. We could see that. And we could also see something that was discussed at the meeting in Novigrad, where the Saudis attended at the same time they did not go to the G7 meeting in Italy. There were some things that were brought up at that meeting. Now to the question. Dilma Rousseff is her name. Dilma is the former president of Brazil. And Dilma is the head of the BRICS New Development Bank. This is no small fry. This is a very, very powerful woman who understands exactly where things are going. And she came out and she said, look, I had two meetings on the sideline with Vladimir Putin and a man named Sergei Glaziev. Sergei Glaziev is the reason that publicly for almost 4 years, when everyone thought I was nuts, I would say they're going to come out with a common settlement currency. He's been telling us this. He is the economic advisor or the finance minister for the Eurasian Economic Union. And he said, look, the BRICS will have a common settlement currency. It'll be a basket of commodities and a basket of BRICS plus currencies. Been saying that forever. So Delma comes out and she says a couple things happened. Number one, 59 countries have formally thrown their hat in the ring to join. Number two, we have agreed in principle to a new settlement currency. Now that's different than a BRICS currency, but to a new settlement currency that will be called the unit. And the unit will be a basket of 60% currency of the BRICS plus countries. No more than 30% of any one country's currency can comprise that basket, and a basket of gold, not commodities. Gold. What is gold? The only other tier one asset in the world. Who's been buying all the gold? Oh, yeah, the central banks. That's right. Mostly the central banks of those countries. And what have they been doing with it? Oh, yeah, bringing it home, repatriating it out of the hands of the West. And it will be traded over something called Project M Bridge, as in money. Project M Bridge, I've been talking about for just over a year, was a cross-border payment system that was designed by China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates. And it is a system that is not compatible with dollars, and it is a system that does not allow for swift interference. I can't sanction you. I can't stop that if that's what I want to do as the West who's imposing their way. Nope, ain't gonna work. And what's interesting about Project M-Bridge, it allows countries to trade their own central bank digital currencies. Now, it's important to understand, if we take the entire world's GDP and the countries that comprise it, 99% of those countries have a CBDC in operation or development. And the first two trades that we saw, test trades last year, was China trading digital yuan with the UAE for gold and for oil. Now, gold and oil are being remonetized across the globe. Gold is more valuable than the currency that purchases it, as is oil. Iran just awarded a massive contract to China for for remodernizing their biggest airport, and they're paying for it in oil. China will buy corn and soybeans from Brazil, pay for it in yuan, and which is immediately convertible into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Remember, the only other tier one reserve asset in the world. So, in any case, we are witnessing a period of time where all of these countries are realizing the importance of gold and of these unions. Anyways, they said that the unit settlement token will trade over Project Enbridge. Now, it's important to note that Saudi Arabia just became a full participant in Project Enbridge, the fifth country to do it. Full participant. The dollar is not compatible with Enbridge. It is also backed by the Bank of International Settlements. Where'd that come from? The same group that reclassified gold as the world's only other tier one
Right.
reserve asset. And so you can kind of see where this is going. So,
Yeah.
well, I mentioned all of those countries that have repatriated their gold. Yes, it seems very logical that the removal of counterparty risk is a reason that they've done that. By the way, for those people who think gold is a pet rock, it has outperformed every traditional asset on the planet for the last 25 years. It has doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury, but does not have the counterparty risk of us saying, I don't like what you're doing, give it to me. I'm going to steal it from you and give it in the form of weapons to the country you're in war against. No, gold has no counterparty risk, and it's even beat the performance of the S&P 500 over that same period of time with dividends reinvested, which averaged 9.6%, gold 9.9. It's
Wow.
outperforming everything. These countries understand this,
Yeah.
but what's really important is that it's not, I don't think it has as much to do with the counterparty risk as what I'm about to tell you. And that is the new unit settlement token. If you read the white paper on it, remember it's traded over Enbridge. So before I say that, the goal of Enbridge would be if I'm China and you're Russia, um, and I want to buy wheat from you in Russia, and you want to buy whatever gold from me, China. We'll trade with one another using our central bank digital currencies over Enbridge. You'll take my digital ruble, I'll take your digital yuan, and we'll do that. And the whole concept of this is to maintain a solid, fundamental monetary system for each of these countries, not reliant on the West. You take
Mhm.
care of your economy, you take care of your economy, keep it solid, and we'll trade with one another using our local currencies. When in South Africa last year, when they said, look, we're not going to issue the common settlement currency this year, we're going to go back to the drawing board. We're going to come back and present our findings in Russia here in October. But in the meantime, all of the BRICS countries, let's trade with one another in local currencies. And you're seeing that they're not trading in dollars. As I
Yeah.
mentioned, Iran getting paid in oil, or Brazil selling corn and soybeans to China for the digital yuan, Russia and India trading in rupee and ruble. They're not trading in dollars.
Mm.
That's super, super important. But maybe I have enough digital yuan. Maybe I have enough digital rupee. Maybe I don't want that. I would like the settlement currency. So, what is a settlement currency? Instead of it being a BRICS currency, because we all have our own currencies, we're going to have a common settlement currency. That way, we're not reliant upon one central location. Like here it is now, the West, the dollar, everyone is reliant on the West. That's not a good, that's a unipolar world. They want a
Yes.
multipolar world. So everyone has their own ecosystem to maintain and to take good care of, to be a steward of, so
Mhm.
that people will trade with me. I want to have a strong ruble. I want to have a strong rupee. I want to have a strong yuan. Have to do that in order for these countries to trade. But if I want to buy energy, or I want to buy something and I just don't want your currency at the moment, no disrespect, I just would rather have the settlement token. What is
Right.
it? The unit. 40% gold in kilobar form, deliverable upon request, and 60% BRICS currencies, of which 30% can't be more than one currency. Okay, good. Well, what's the point? The white paper, here's the kicker, says the gold that will be used and the currency that will be used to make the new settlement token will be held in escrow accounts within the borders of the countries that possess it, and continuously and independently audited. In other
Wow.
words, When India brings all of their gold back home that they've held at the Bank of England since 1991 and buys 1.5 times the amount of gold they bought all of last year in just the first 4 months of this year, which is a record year, brings that all home, they're going to put that gold in an escrow account within their own borders and have it audited continuously. They do not need to rely upon it being sent to Beijing or to Moscow or Dubai. In other words, this whole system allows for countries to maintain their own house
Yeah.
instead of relying upon the Bank of England, instead of relying upon the New York Federal Reserve. It allows these countries to not have to be reliant on any one central power, yet spend the effort in keeping their own house clean. And if I can hold my own gold, think of Venezuela. Can we have our gold back, please, Bank of England? Nope, you can't. Now, these countries will hold their own gold. When they comprise the settlement token, it'll be held in an escrow account within their own borders and independently and continuously audited. And if I want to buy oil from you and I want to take your unit, okay, cool. But by the way, I want to take possession of the gold this time. Okay, cool. Here you go. And we're going to ship it to you. See, what this is doing is allowing these countries to have independence free from one authoritarian regime.
Hmm.
And it's quite genius, if you ask me. So, yes,
Yes.
repatriation of gold is to remove counterparty risk, but it's bigger than that. And you wouldn't know that watching the mainstream news.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that are very well read. In this case, they're just reading the wrong stuff because I'll tell you, this in and of itself, if it is ratified this month, if they come out and say, indeed, now Delma said we've agreed in principle to this.
Hmm.
Two meaning we've agreed in principle to this new settlement currency. That's what she said at the meeting in Novigrad last month. If they come back here in 3 weeks and say, yes, we have all agreed and ratified the new settlement token, it will be called the unit, you can light a fuse on the dollar just like that. Now, how long is that fuse? I don't know. But what would be the motivation to hold US dollars, which are being inflated away at
Hmm.
$100,000 per second, 24/7? And worse yet, remember the other part of the petro deal, recycle the excess into treasuries? Who in their right mind, right, would buy treasuries when the West, at their whim, can say, nah, we don't like what you're doing. We don't align ideologically. Forget about the fact that we're just as bad or maybe worse than you in your eyes. Doesn't matter. We're going to take those treasuries. We're going to give it to someone else who you're in a war against.
Hmm.
And not only that, we've destabilized the treasury market and we've chosen inflation over austerity. In other words, we're already pivoting and going back to lowering rates and reigniting the inflation engine. So the treasuries that you own are being inflated, the dollar is being inflated, and if we don't like you, we're going to take it. So it's almost too stupid to be stupid, Zara. Have we incentivized this? Are we trying to reset the system? And
Yeah.
and if you take a step back, there's a man named Jared Bernstein. He is the lead economic advisor to the United States government. He is a man who has a degree in music and a master's degree in social work. That sounds like great qualifications to be the number one economic advisor to the US government. His entire thesis, he wrote a report called Dethrone King Dollar, is to lose the world's reserve status because it's a privilege we can no longer afford. Idiot.
Wow.
So, what better way to do that than weaponize the dollar and the treasury market, inflate away the hell of a currency, just literally inflate its value away through 100,000 per second, and then to sign an executive order to go green, tell the Saudis, hey, you guys, this is Biden's first act. It's been a good run, but we're going a different direction.
Right.
And then to the beginning of this conversation. If it were just that, okay, well, this country is unified. No, it's not. This country has high standards when it comes to immigration, election, and judicial. Really? Does it? We're at 123% debt to GDP. When I started in this country, or in this industry, if you were over 100% debt to GDP, you were a banana republic. And most of those banana republics had questions surrounding their electoral system and their judicial
Right.
system. Have we
Right.
become, is this what they're trying to do? Now I'm going to shut up in one more second because my mentor, Richard Russell, 20 years ago used to say the Fed is so far down the rabbit hole with debt, they have two choices: inflate or default, inflate or die. How about option number three? You incentivize the world to move away from the reserve status of the petrodollar through weaponization, through inflation and through destabilization of the inside of this country. It's the whole picture.
Wow.
And now, if we get this ratification and everyone who's had to own dollars for 50 years, called synthetic demand, you have to own dollars to buy energy or you don't get energy. So everyone has had to stockpile dollars. What if all of a sudden OPEC says, we're going to take the settlement currency, we're going to take gold, we're not going to take the dollar? Bang! That fast. That fast. Every single country on the planet would be incentivized to dump dollars and to dump treasure. And as that tsunami of inflation hits our shores, what happens? Interest rates must spike to the moon in order to compensate. You can't have 30% inflation and 5% interest rates, your currency dies. So interest rates spike. What happens? Stocks, inversely correlated. Bonds, inversely correlated. Real estate, inversely correlated. What do we hear about the banks? Over leverage, undercapitalized, inversely correlated.
Right.
Insurance companies, loaded with treasuries, inversely correlated. This is the Great Reset. Everything happens at once. Bang, stocks, bonds, real estate, the dollar, the insurance companies and the banks. And you know what? It was those SOBs. They did it to us. How could they do that to us? Have no fear, because Lael Brainerd is here. She's a number two. She's a modern monetary theorist, the number two economic advisor. She worked at the Fed. She worked at the Treasury. She developed the CBDC with MIT last year or the year before, actually 3 years ago, when Biden fast-tracked it. Here comes your new central bank digital currency. Take it, and you too will be made whole, Zahra. I know you lost your insurance policies. I know your bank is gone, obliterated, and I know things are a mess. Just sign on the dotted line, take the central bank digital currency, and we'll make you whole. That's what modern monetary theory is. Now, this is everything I said up until that moment is fact. Is this what they're trying to do? Could it be option 3? Find a villain. Instead of inflating, which we've done, instead of defaulting, what you can say we did to Russia, we defaulted on their $5 billion in treasuries. We stole it.
Stole it, yeah.
But you find a villain to start the whole system over, to create a rallying cry here in the United States in order to push back against them, to take the CBDC and reset the system. Now, don't know, but again, is it too stupid to be stupid, or are our politicians that far removed from the ramifications of their actions? I don't know. You tell me. To me, I start to hedge towards this. It's too stupid to be stupid. Everything we've done inside the country and everything we've done outside the country, not to mention the brain dead monetary policy and the wholly fiscal irresponsibility, it's all one big piece of a giant puzzle. One without the other is lacking. And that's why I was so excited to talk with you for what you're talking about, because we put it all together and you're like, whoa, that is something you need to think about. Because if we lose the world reserve status, it will be a religious experience for all of us, because we've lived well beyond our standards, thanks to the good graces of our foreign creditors, who we are pissing off more and more and more by the day. And look at this, our country, and say, what the hell is going on over there?
Yeah.
That's the whole big piece put together.
I mean, stunning, an amazing job that you just did of laying it all out and putting those pieces together. Hearing it the way you just described it, it has to be deliberate. There's no way successive administrations could just sit back and go, I'm not really sure what's happening, or okay, we'll just allow it to happen. It has to be deliberate. And that makes it diabolical. Because
when you just look at the border, how could there even, so there's something called the Cloward-Piven theory. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but you should check it out if you're not. It's a husband and wife professor in Columbia University in the 60s who taught how to turn this country into a socialist country.
Right.
How would you do it? Well, you would destabilize the inner cities with mass immigration, create a loyal serfdom of people who would never vote Republican ever again. You basically incite and bring into the picture universal basic income. Look at the inner cities. Look at the immigration. How did we let 20 million or more people in here illegally? If 1% of those people have bad intentions, that's 200,000 people. How about 5%? It's 1 million. It's bigger than a standing army. And so when you talk about voters, this idiot, this freaking moronic governor, California Governor Newsom, just passed a law last Thursday, and he calls it discriminatory to not. I mean, I could puke thinking about it, to be honest with you, saying if it's discriminatory to ask people for identification and illegal, it is now illegal in the state of California to ask you for your identification to vote. And that's discriminatory. It's pathetic. And
It
they
is.
want these people to vote because you create a loyal serfdom of people who will never, ever vote the other way. And you turn this country socialist. Is that what they're trying to do? Could it be? I don't know, but it's too stupid to be stupid
Yeah.
in my mind. And you're right. It's just, it reeks of deliberacy. Is
Yeah.
that a word, deliberacy? I don't know if it is. Well, let's go with it. Let's pretend it is.
Deliberateness. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So is it then, are we at a point now with everything you just laid out, where with gold prices being what they are now and all of this incredible demand that you just described, are we at a point where individuals who are laddering up or just starting to get into precious metals are going to get shut out? Is it just going to be impossible?
I think it will be before it's all said and done. Again, remember, gold is the world's only other tier one reserve asset. The central banks in this year, the first 6 months of this year, have bought more gold than at any time ever in the first 6 months ever in history of a year, only surpassing last year. What are the central banks? Not only are they most well-funded traders in the world, they're the most well-informed, the most well-informed traders on the globe. And I can show you just an example of that, the way the BIS does things. Now, I want you to put that in context with all of the banks that have repatriated their gold before the announcement of the settlement currency, the unit. In 2017, it started with the German Bundesbank, give us back our gold, which was weird because gold had been falling for 6 years. And then it was the Bank of Austria, Hungary, Turkey, Poland, the Czech National Bank, the Dutch National Bank, and a bunch of others that give us back our gold too. Well, why? It was interesting. Then the following year, in 2018, those same banks, those same central banks bought more gold as a group than they did in the 60 years previously combined, doubled it in 2019. And then mysteriously, coincidentally, the BIS said gold's the only other tier one asset in the world. Obviously said, psst, 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 you got to get your gold, start buying it, bring it home. Well, look at it now. We're seeing all these banks repatriate their gold, 40 of them, give us back our gold. And now the settlement token is announced that will be held within your own borders. And the BIS is behind Project Enbridge. So you need to understand that these players know what's coming.
Yeah.
And the central bankers have been buying gold at a level the world has never seen before because they know what's coming. They know the playbook. So ultimately, gold will go to levels that I don't think people will ever even imagine. In fact, we can bring it home to Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming. But before that, we can look at the head of the Dutch central bank um, who has been saying for a very long time we should revalue the gold that is being held on our balance sheets. And every central bank around the globe has gold in an account. You can't make this up. On their balance sheet, it's called the gold revaluation account. That's where it's held in an account called the gold revaluation account. And it's valued at $35 an ounce throughout all of Europe, $42.22 here. That's the old prices. It's still valued on the balance sheet. So the Dutch National Bank man says, the head of the bank says, we should revalue it and offset our liabilities in our balance sheet. Cynthia Lummis, just a few months ago at the big Bitcoin meeting in Tennessee where Trump spoke, right after she gets up and says, I've just drafted a bill to revalue the gold that the Federal Reserve holds on behalf of the Treasury to a sufficient enough level to partially fund this new Bitcoin strategic Bitcoin account Trump was talking about. The idea of revaluing gold is something you will see. If we put gold at $150,000 an ounce, as crazy as that sounds, but why does it sound crazy? People say Bitcoin should be there. It's not crazy. You put it at 150,000 an ounce like that, your balance sheet goes from putrid to pristine. You've now offset your liabilities.
Right.
And if the U.S. Treasury says, I'll pay $150,000 to every country that wants to be foolish enough to give us their gold, we'll do it.
Yeah.
And now it is what it is. But I think ultimately you will see gold run away. I think you will see gold go higher than anyone ever thinks possible. And in 35 years of finance, that's the one unequivocal I've learned, that markets go higher than anyone thinks possible and fall further than anyone thinks possible. When I started in 1989, the Dow Jones was 2,100. And the first conference I went to, a man said that the Dow will go to 10,000. He was laughed off the stage. And at the same time, the Japanese Nikkei was 40,000, and they owned Pebble Beach and Rockefeller Center and casinos in Vegas and ski resorts in Colorado. And they made better anything with a motherboard or an engine, VCR, TV, Honda, Yamaha, all was better quality than the West. And everyone thought they were taking over the world. And it's been 35 years, and their Nikkei touched it for a second a few months ago, where it was in 1989, and it fell back down. It took a whole generation to come back to where we were. It fell further than anyone would have ever thought possible. And if in 1989 I told you the Dow Jones would go to 40,000, you'd say you're full of crap. And
Mm-hmm.
so the point of it is that yes, I do think it will go higher than anyone truly things possible. I do. And I think the sky's the limit for the price of gold. And I think it will never come back down. Because why? It is a tier one reserve asset. It will be pegged to the settlement currency. And even Kristalina Georgieva, the head of the IMF, said any central bank digital currency that is not pegged to something is fiat. What are they going to peg it to? Gold, the only other tier one asset in the world, as redefined by the most powerful bank on the planet, the Bank of International Settlements.
Mm-hmm.
Put it all together. Why are the central banks buying all their gold and bringing it home? Because they know it is the foundation of a new system. Pardon my French here, but when you pee in the punch bowl, the way that West has for so many years, here, have a glass. No, no, thanks. I'm not going to drink it again. The only way you ever get people to drink that Kool-Aid again is to peg it to something. And what better way to do it than to marry blockchain technology, Project Enbridge, with
Mm-hmm.
a commodity? And now
Mm-hmm.
you have veracity, immutability, and transparency, and a commodity backing it that is the only other tier one asset in the world. So, yes, I do believe that gold will go higher than anyone thinks possible. And there will come a point where it becomes too difficult for people to obtain, not only price wise, but also availability.
Right.
You just won't be able to find it because there's just not, it's such a small market compared to all the money out there. The finite availability would make it very difficult for most people to have a piece of it.
Are you at Miles Franklin starting to see some of those stress signals already in terms of the supply of precious metals?
In throughout the pandemic, it was the single biggest challenge of our career, of my career. Getting product, I had to go deep into my credit line, borrow tens and tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars, and on top of everything, we had to buy metal going out 4 or 5 months in advance on a promise from the mints around the world because the demand massively overwhelmed the supply in the United States. The average allocation of gold from Joe and Jane six pack to the Harvard Endowment Fund is 1/2 of 1%.
Yeah.
It used to be 8% in 1980. If that just goes to the mean of 2.5%, that's a fivefold increase in demand. There'll be nothing left. But what we
Right.
have seen recently during Silver Squeeze in 2020, 2021 ish, we were doing volume that you couldn't believe, but a lot of it were just small orders, people trying to profit and overwhelm the silver market the way they did GameStop and AMC. They weren't doing it for the right motivation. The right motivation is not to get wealthy buying gold and silver. Gold and silver are wealth. If you own enough, you'll be wealthy, but not trying to overwhelm the system. What we're seeing now are very, very, very large orders from very large institutional and private buyers, more so than everyone just trying to buy a few ounces to make a huge profit. It is not about return on your money; it's about return of it. And I think there are a lot of very wise people who understand that.
Yeah.
So yes, I think you will see that. You will 100% see that. What we are seeing, I think, is the opening salvo to that, where the big money, which is typically 2 or 3 steps ahead of everyone else, is jumping in. And uh, to the level that really shocks me, actually, the size of the order volume is not what it once was, but the order size is far greater than anything I've seen in 3.5 decades in this industry.
Um, there's so many other things I would love to talk to you about, and so we're gonna have to have you back again. But I want to
I'd
let
love
you.
to.
Yeah, I want to let you go, but just a few more sort of practical points before we let you go. You just did a live stream recently with one of your brokers and your good friend, and you were talking about metrics and ratios around gold to silver and why silver is starting to look like a very incredible opportunity. So can you just walk through some of that, explain what that means for people who are kind of new to that picture?
So if you go back to prehistoric times and dig a big hole in the ground, you'll see a 16 to 1 ratio between silver to gold. 16 ounces of silver worth 1 ounce of gold geologically. That was we'll call that God's ratio. That's the mining ratio, the geologic footprint. And it was that way for 5,000 years, all the way up, even when Sir Isaac Newton was trying to figure out the ratio for the mint of gold and silver, he chose 16 to 1 because that was a geologic ratio. And it's been that way since the beginning of time. So God's ratio is 16 to 1. We get to the Industrial Revolution, say 150, 200 years ago, and that ratio, man's ratio, said, we're going to make it around 42 to 1 because gold's role is money and logistics, right? So you could have $100,000 worth of gold in your purse right now and get up and go for a 3-mile walk and wouldn't even have a sore shoulder. 100,000 in silver is going to weigh 200 pounds plus.
Right.
So even a little bit more than that. So the price ratio has averaged roughly 42 to 1 for the past 150 years. Right now, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 85 to 1. That is a geologic and a historical price anomaly.
Wow.
When I look back over my career, the biggest, most successful trades I've ever done center around identification and exploitation of anomalies. It's mathematical law. It's regression to the mean. It's the averages. I spent 50 years in Minnesota. I used to love to snowmobile. I have 2 in my sister's garage. I live now in Delray Beach, Florida for the last 4 years. And if I woke up this morning to 1.5 feet of snow on the golf course I live on in my backyard, I wouldn't call my sister and say, Betsy, send me my snowmobiles, because I would know it's an anomaly.
Right.
And that's what this is in every single context of the word. But markets can stay irrational longer than we can stay solvent. Point of it is simply this, that the gold to silver ratio, in my opinion, is one of the most unique opportunities of a generation, where you buy silver right now at an 85 to 1 ratio. And if it got down to 42 to 1, all that is the average of the past 150, 200 years. That's it. You're just average, and it's a double. And it's coming out of the ground right now. Remember I said 16 to 1? Excuse me. Silver is found in nature in a form called epithermal. Like your skin is epidermis.
Mm-hmm.
Epithermal is very near the surface. Big deposits were found decades ago. Of all the silver mined last year, about 25% came from companies that mine it. That's it. The big deposits found long ago, most of the silver, 70+%, about 5% from recycling. The rest comes from byproduct mining. I'm mining copper, I'm mining zinc or lead. Oh, found some silver, let's sell it to the market.
Right.
It's a stumble across it. So it's depleting. It's coming out of the ground right now. It's 7 to 1. My friend Keith Neumeyer, the head of the CEO of First Majestic Silver, one of the biggest companies in the world, publicly says it all the time. Tells me personally when I talk to him, 7 to 1. So you buy it at 85 to 1. If it just gets to 42 to 1, and I'll give you a real life example of how this happens, but if it just got to 42 to 1, it's double. If it gets anywhere near its geologic ratio, and doesn't it have to get there sometime at some point? Doesn't it have to, the math have to work? Yeah, of course it does. That's 11 times undervalued. Right now, it is 11 times undervalued. So silver is in its relation to gold. So if we trade into gold, in other words, if we say I have $1 million and I want to buy gold, but if I buy it in silver right now and all it does is get back to its 150-year average, it would be like buying 2 million worth of gold today. If it got anywhere near its mining ratio, which it has to over some point, it would be like buying $11 million worth of gold today when we convert it back. And in 2010 was the first YouTube video I did. I called my friend Bix Swear. I said, Bix, the gold silver ratio is 85 to 1, where it is about right now. I said, it's never happened before.
Oh.
And I said, it's the second time in human history it's happened. Second time. And I said, we need to get online. And I've never done a podcast. I do a lot of public speaking. Let's just do this. Let's tell everyone to trade their gold to silver right now. They got to do that and play this ratio. And so I did that. I called all my clients, said, you got to trade your gold to silver. Um, Within 7 months, we had $1,915 gold in 2011 and $50 silver. That's 37 to 1. So anyone who would have traded their gold at 85 to 1, giving 1 ounce of gold for 85 ounces of silver, 7 months later could have traded back into gold, only needing 37 ounces to get that 1 ounce of gold, making over 2 times what they started with without paying any money in 7 months.
Wow.
Just getting just below its 150-year average. Regression to the mean. Going back to the snowmobile story, I would know that within a few days that's going to melt and we're going to regress to the mean of what Florida temperatures are. It's an anomaly. In every respect of the world, this is an anomaly. We go back and look last Thursday, a week ago Thursday, gold was up 1.1%, about 35 bucks. Big day. Silver was up $1.60, not as impressive dollar wise, but it's a 5.1% gain. Silver was 5 times the performance of gold in one day. Now, that is something I would expect to ultimately happen over time as things regress to the mean. So, yeah, I think it's an opportunity of a generation, 100%. 100%.
Fantastic. Amazing information. I would love to go on, but as I said, I want to be respectful of your time and our viewers' time. So let's wrap up by tell people how they can learn more about you, more about Miles Franklin, and can you let us in on your secret list?
Yeah, so I'd love to come back on anytime.
Thank you.
And our mutual friend who introduced us, I'd like to give him a heartfelt thank you. It's been very enjoyable chatting with you, even
Peter
though I've
Grandich.
probably talked more than I should have, but
Not
I
at
have a
all.
bad habit of doing that. Just keep that in mind. I usually can't do anything very quickly. But so yes, I have my own YouTube program that I just started. It's called Little by Little with Andy Schectman, and that will be on our Miles Franklin YouTube channel. We do have a website, milesfranklin.com, where we have published prices, but they're not our best prices. We're a brokerage model more. We want people to call us and establish a relationship. And request our price sheet at info@Miles Franklin, or any questions that you have heard on here, or questions you have on precious metals IRAs, or any question you have related to this conversation, or any other questions you have, um, and we will answer them with no obligation, or just ask for our price sheet. Our price sheet, far better prices than you see on our website, amongst the most competitive in North America. And I mean that. But we, for many reasons, keep it close to the vest and don't publish it. But if you call and in the subject line say you heard about us on this podcast, you would like some information, or just want the price list, it's also a good idea to put your phone number down. We will respect you. But the thing of it is that there are a lot of people who have, especially if we're sending it to like a company email, you're at your work, or a lot of spam filters will stop precious metal company or businesses from getting through. And so we email everyone this stuff, and sometimes they think they didn't get it.
Yeah.
We can put your phone number down, we can text you, we can do whatever, but we respect your privacy. Info@milesfranklin.com is the best way to get that price list, and no obligation necessary for sending the email or requesting the price list.
Wonderful. Well, this has been an incredible hour. I have learned so much, and I'm sure that our viewers have. So I just want to thank you, Andy, for
Yeah.
coming. We'll welcome you back very soon. And again, thank you, Peter Grandich, for making this
Thank you,
introduction.
Peter.
And we will talk to you soon. Thank you, Andy.
I look forward to that. You have a good one, and we'll look forward to picking up where we left off.
Super. Us too. Can't wait. Well, as I said, another conversation full of incredible information. We're so lucky to have guests like Andy who share very generously their time and their expertise with us every week. We're also very grateful to all our viewers like you for your support and your encouragement. If you haven't already, please go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to this channel so you'll be the first to know about all our latest updates. Collapse Life gives people tools to take control of their lives in an uncertain world. We have new stories every week on Substack at collapselife.substack.com. We're also on X at collapse_life. And we would love it if you dropped by our Collapse Life store and browsed the fun stuff we've got there. Then come back and check back here next week for another episode. We look forward to seeing you. Until then, keep your chin up. It's only collapse. See you soon.